Picture this. The sun is just coming up. You're sipping your morning coffee, looking out at your vegetable beds, and the nightmare is back. Holes eaten right through your greens, a thick layer of aphids clinging to the bottoms of your tomato leaves, and squash bugs marching around your zucchini like they hold the deed to your property. And the worst part, you've already applied pesticide 3 times this month. But what if I shared a secret with you? What if I told you that two of the most inexpensive metals on the planet, metals you can hold in the palm of your hand for less than 20 bucks, could completely eradicate your insect issues forever? No more toxic sprays, no more constant reapplication, and no more rotating chemical formulas, just because the bugs became immune yet again. The traditional Amish families I've been visiting in Lancaster County have relied on this precise technique since the mid-19th century. It's the secret behind why their crop rows look like painted masterpieces, while the rest of us surrender half our yields to insects we can't even properly name. And you need to keep watching until the very end, because I uncovered a fascinating document hidden away in the agricultural archives of Penn State from 1923. It's a field report detailing a farm right outside Intercourse, Pennsylvania, and it reveals exactly why this method was scrubbed from every gardening manual published after the Second World War. The reason isn't what you might guess, and once you hear it, you'll perfectly understand why your grandparents never struggled with the garden pests we face today. Let's dive into the revelation that blew my mind when Eli, a traditional Amish grandfather in his 70s, first demonstrated it to me. He took me out to his potato field. Now, if you grow potatoes, you know the terror of the Colorado potato beetle. Those little striped nightmares can devour a plant down to its bare stalks in a matter of 48 hours. Eli's potato plants were absolutely immaculate. There wasn't a single beetle in sight, nor a single chewed leaf, and I observed his routine closely. He absolutely never applied any sprays, no neem oil, no dustings of diatomaceous earth, nothing whatsoever. Instead, what he did was press slender pieces of copper down into the dirt right around the base of each plant. They were just narrow ribbons of copper, roughly 2 inches wide, pushed about an inch into the ground, so only a tiny top edge remained visible. That was his entire defense. The underlying trick, he explained, is that the vast majority of crawling pests will absolutely refuse to cross over copper. Insect bodies naturally carry a very faint electrical charge. When they bridge the gap between the moist soil and the copper, it sparks a microscopic galvanic reaction. To the bug, it feels like a painful, mild electric shock. Slugs suffer the most. The reaction with their slime is virtually instantaneous. But it's not just slugs. Beetles, cutworms, earwigs, pillbugs, and the ants that actively farm your aphids, they all steer well clear of it. Cornell University actually verified this exact phenomenon back in a 1994 trial testing copper boundaries against slugs. They recorded a 96% drop in pest activity. Not 40%, not 60, 96%. Best of all, the copper doesn't wear down. It won't wash off in the rain, and you never have to reapply it. Eli swore to me that the copper pieces guarding his potatoes had been sitting in that very same dirt for 19 straight years. 19 years of perfect pest control for the price of one little packet of copper strips. But copper by itself is only one half of what makes this entire system function. Because while copper stops the crawlers in their tracks, it does absolutely nothing for the pests flying in from above. And that is exactly where the second metal comes into play, and where this concept gets truly bizarre. The Amish community has been utilizing zinc in tandem with copper for more than a century and a half. And honestly, until I witnessed it firsthand in Holmes County, Ohio, I was highly skeptical too. Zinc, particularly when applied as galvanized nails or thin strips attached to wooden garden stakes, generates what the old German-speaking agriculturalists referred to as a Spannungsfeld, or tension field. When you have both zinc and copper residing in damp earth, they establish a subtle bioelectric circuit. The dirt itself acts as the electrolyte. You are basically constructing a massive low-voltage battery directly beneath your vegetable beds. And while this electrical current is way too faint for a human to detect, it is potent enough to repel soft-bodied bugs and completely scramble the egg-laying instincts of airborne threats, like squash vine borers and cabbage moths. Back in 2008, Auburn University conducted a soil conductivity test that actually quantified this exact effect. They discovered that garden plots utilizing this dual metal setup experienced a 37% boost in microbial life and saw a drastic reduction in pest invasions compared to the control plots. The scientists couldn't even fully explain it. They conceded in their final report that something was occurring down in the root system that conventional bug science just couldn't account for. But the Amish don't require an academic explanation. They've understood its power ever since their ancestors transported the practice from Switzerland and Germany's Palatinate region back in the 18th century. This was a totally standard technique on virtually every traditional farm in Pennsylvania until about 1948, and then it just evaporated from the literature. Which brings me to a realization I don't think you're going to appreciate. Now, if you are someone who already has a home with an established garden that you've been cultivating for decades, you might be sitting there thinking, this sounds like a massive project only suitable for brand new homesteaders. If so, pay close attention because this next advice is specifically tailored for you. You do not need to destroy your current setup. You don't have to start from scratch. Here's exactly what Eli instructed me to pass along to folks back home who already have mature gardens. Go to any local hardware store and grab a roll of copper flashing, the kind roofers utilize. It's usually about 6 inches wide and runs around $18 for a 10-foot coil. Cut that roll into smaller pieces about 2 inches wide and 8 inches long. Press those strips straight down into the dirt around the outside edges of every raised bed, spacing them out roughly a foot apart, leaving just half an inch sticking above the soil line. You can finish an entire garden bed in less than 10 minutes. Next, grab a box of galvanized roofing nails, which will cost you maybe $3 at a farm supply shop, and drive them right into your current wooden stakes, your tomato cages, or your trellis supports. Put 4 or 5 nails into each wooden post, hammering them deep so the metal heads are completely flush with the timber. That is all there is to it. You haven't uprooted a single plant. You haven't damaged any root networks. You haven't had to rebuild a thing. You have completely retrofitted your current garden over a weekend for less than $25. And here is exactly what is going to happen next. During the first week, you won't notice much difference. In week 2, you will watch your slug damage plummet to practically zero. By the 4th week, your aphid infestations will crash simply because the ants that protect and farm them will refuse to cross your copper perimeter. By the 6th week, the cabbage moths that used to treat your brassicas like a nursery will redirect their flights to your neighbor's yard. And by the time your first full harvest wraps up, you will honestly ask yourself how you ever managed to grow food without this trick. I had a neighbor back in Ohio, a lady in her 60s, who had been battling squash bugs for 15 agonizing years. She decided to try this retrofit method. 3 months later, my phone rang, and I could hear her chuckling on the other end. She told me, I don't have a single squash bug, not one. After 15 years of war, she admitted to me that she felt completely ripped off, swindled by every gardening magazine, every university extension handout, and every big box store employee who told her she needed a chemical spray when the actual cure was sitting over in the plumbing or roofing aisle the entire time. Which loops us right back around to that fascinating 1923 document. Deep inside the Penn State Agricultural Archive sits a batch of old field reports from county extension agents. Back in the 1920s, they were sent out to survey Amish and Mennonite farms, trying to figure out how these folks kept their crop yields incredibly high without relying on store-bought fertilizers or sprays. One specific report penned by an agent named H.R. Shoemaker focuses on a property near Intercourse, Pennsylvania. The farmer, listed only as Brother Yoder, had been utilizing copper and zinc in his vegetable patches for 40 years. Shoemaker's notes explicitly state that Yoder's farm showed absolutely zero measurable insect damage on his potatoes, cabbages, or squash family plants. The agent urged his superiors to conduct further studies, but that further study never took place. Instead, the 1940s brought the chemical revolution. DDT exploded onto the market in 1945, quickly followed by organophosphate pesticides. The USDA pivoted its entire educational apparatus toward chemical pest management simply because that was where the massive corporate research funding was flowing. The copper and zinc barrier methods, which were actually still being printed in American farming guides as late as 1938, just stopped being talked about. They weren't banned or made illegal. They were just silently erased from every new textbook, pamphlet, and magazine. By the time 1960 rolled around, an entirely new generation of American gardeners had absolutely no idea this method existed. But the Amish just kept right on doing what they always did. They aren't subscribing to mainstream garden magazines or going to university extension seminars. They hand their knowledge down directly from father to son, mother to daughter, preserving the exact methods they were taught. While the bulk of American agriculture wasted 70 years running on a treadmill, chasing one new pesticide after another, as bugs constantly evolve resistance, the Amish were pulling in pristine harvests using nothing but two pieces of metal and a hammer. Now, this is usually the point where most folks tune out and just try what I've already explained. And hey, if you only do that much, you will still witness a massive transformation in your yard. But there is a secondary layer to this that virtually no one outside the plain communities is aware of. And I need to share it with you because this is the aspect that truly left me speechless. You see, copper and zinc don't merely chase bugs away. They actively nourish the earth. Both of these metals act as crucial micronutrients for plant vitality. Copper is a key player in photosynthesis and the creation of lignin. Lignin is the structural material that makes a plant's cell walls tough enough to withstand insect jaws in the first place. Meanwhile, zinc is necessary for proper enzyme function and creating auxin, the essential hormone dictating root development. When you stick these metals into moist dirt, they begin to slowly, very slowly, leach microscopic trace amounts of ionic copper and zinc straight into the root zone. We are talking mere micrograms here. It's completely non-toxic and will never accumulate to hazardous levels. But throughout a long growing season, your vegetables absorb precisely the trace minerals required to construct incredibly robust root networks and armored cell walls. And here's the real magic. A vegetable with high levels of lignin and a booming root system actually becomes chemically unappealing to the vast majority of insects. Bugs have a sixth sense for weak, struggling plants. That is exactly why the most sickly tomato plant in your garden is always the one swarming with pests. Vigorous, healthy plants release a totally different set of volatile organic compounds, and most pest insects will just fly right past them. So the dual metals are working a double shift. They throw up an immediate physical and electrical wall to block invaders while simultaneously fortifying the crops from the inside out. By the time a bug actually manages to breach the barrier, it encounters a plant it has zero appetite for. Amos, a local blacksmith I met in Holmes County, summed it up perfectly. He told me, "The English believe pest control is all about killing things. We believe it's about building the plant up so strong that the bug simply doesn't care about it. The metals accomplish both. That is why the system lasts." And modern science absolutely validates this. A 2016 study out of Ohio State University analyzed low-input farming techniques, specifically measuring the micronutrient absorption in plots using buried copper and zinc versus plots using chemical fertilizers. The metal-treated gardens boasted 22% higher lignin levels in their leafy greens and experienced 41% fewer pest attacks over the season. Even better, the researchers pointed out that this benefit compounds annually. The longer those metals stay in the dirt, the stronger the effect becomes. Think about pesticides. They lose their punch every single year as bugs adapt. You're stuck on a treadmill that tilts a little higher every season. The Amish, on the other hand, are using a system that gets a little easier every season. But before we wrap up, I need to share one last detail. It's the specific technique I teased at the beginning of this video, the secret pulled straight from the 1923 archives. Because Eli showed me a highly specific placement strategy that absolutely nobody on the internet is getting right. If people have even heard about using copper, they usually just lay it flat on the mulch or wrap a band around a tree trunk. That is completely useless. For the copper to work, it must be buried in damp earth at least an inch deep with just a tiny sliver peeking out. Why? Because the galvanic shock that repels the bugs relies on constant contact with soil moisture. A dry piece of copper resting on top of wood chips accomplishes absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, the zinc needs to sit above the dirt. It should be hammered into wood somewhere between 6 inches and 3 feet off the ground. The sweet spot, according to the traditional Pennsylvania Dutch method, is right at knee height. That is the exact elevation where flying pests make their final descent, and it's where the electromagnetic interference is the most intense. But here is the ultimate trick from that 1923 Shoemaker archive, the one I have never spotted in a single contemporary gardening guide. There's a lone paragraph in that report detailing an extra step Brother Yoder took, going way beyond the standard copper ribbons and zinc nails. At all four corners of his primary vegetable bed, he buried a small clay pot so the upper rim sat perfectly level with the dirt. Inside each pot, he dropped one solid copper penny, meaning minted before 1982, and one galvanized roofing nail. He filled the pots to the brim with rainwater caught from his barn, topping them off whenever they dried out. The agent casually mentioned that Yoder referred to this four-pot arrangement as the heart of the garden, claiming the copper strips alone were only half as powerful without it. When I first read that, I almost brushed it off. It sounded like pure folklore, just an old farmer's superstition. But I decided to test it anyway. In a small test garden behind where I was staying in Ohio, I buried 4 clay pots, dropped in 4 pennies from 1978, added 4 nails, and poured in some rainwater. By the end of that first season, the crops in that bed were visibly healthier and more bug-free than the bed utilizing only the strips and stakes. I had no idea how it worked until I tracked down an 80-something retired agricultural chemist from Penn State. He was old enough to remember the pre-chemical farming literature. He told me those 4 water pots generate something called a distributed ionic field. Because rainwater is slightly acidic, it slowly breaks down microscopic copper and zinc ions. The soil's capillary action then draws those ions outward in circular waves. With a pot at every corner, those 4 circles intersect, bathing the entire garden bed in a steady micronutrient gradient. Plants growing inside the zone, he explained, experience a massive spike in systemic acquired resistance. Basically, the plant's natural immune system kicking into overdrive to fight off disease and pests. It's triggered purely by an abundance of those specific micronutrients. You will not find this information on any modern homesteading blog. You won't read it in a best-selling garden book. It lives in precisely 2 places: a dusty 100-year-old typewritten document in Pennsylvania, and the quiet oral traditions of a handful of plain families who use it without even needing to know the science behind it. You can put this to work in your own backyard this very weekend. 4 little terracotta pots, the 4-inch ones that cost $1. 4 pennies minted before 1982, since newer ones are mostly zinc with just a copper wash. 4 galvanized roofing nails and rainwater. That is it. Your total investment? Maybe $5. Total time? 20 minutes. And as long as those clay pots don't shatter, it is basically permanent. When you combine those pots with the copper strips circling your beds and the zinc nails in your wooden stakes, you create an incredibly resilient, self-sustaining pest barrier that costs a fraction of a single bottle of organic bug spray and will outlast us all. The Amish didn't somehow invent modern organic agriculture. They just stubbornly held on to what actually worked, while the rest of the nation chased toxic chemicals down a dead-end street for 7 decades. Here is the honest truth nobody is telling you. If your garden is struggling, it is not your fault. You aren't doing it wrong. Your garden suffers because the simple, effective knowledge was quietly swept under the rug 3 generations ago. All so massive companies could sell you a plastic bottle every spring. If you're the type of grower who has always suspected that we were missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, that the real battle-tested wisdom was hidden away, then you already know your next step. Try it out. See the results with your own eyes. Become that weird neighbor who hands out a piece of copper roofing to the next guy complaining about his slug problem. Before you click away, do me a favor. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is the absolute worst pest that has been driving you insane these past few seasons? Are you fighting squash bugs, cabbage moths, potato beetles, or something completely different? I read every single comment, and I genuinely need to know what you're battling. Why? Because my next video dives heavily into specific insect invasions and the exact old-world Amish remedies for each one. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, because these 2 metals, they are just the surface level. There is an entire hidden world of forgotten agricultural brilliance still thriving out in Lancaster and Holmes counties, and I am documenting it piece by piece. What I am revealing next makes the copper and zinc trick look like child's play. We are building a movement to reclaim the vital knowledge that was stolen from us, one forgotten method at a time, and you are already a part of it. If this story changes the way you look at the simple tools in your shed, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Let's plant the seeds of the future together. The next treasure trove of wisdom will be open soon.